and I'd like to welcome you to our presentation for this week about the over 50 entrepreneur. This is a mega trend. I've been aware of this for a couple of years now. And mega trends are trends that are so important, they create a big groundswell around them. So you in the audience may be an over 50 business person yourself, an entrepreneur, or you may be someone who is just interested in knowing more about megatrends for your own purposes. I welcome you in either case. They both are relevant for the presentation today. So let's talk about the first part today. I want to cover why this is a megatrend. Current census figures, or actually figures from a few years ago, show that about a third of the U.S. population is over 50. That's a enormous number when you consider it. 1 out of 3 people is over the age of 50. So bear that in mind as we look at the other factors that create this megatrend. The over 50 population in the United States controls about 2/3 of the country's wealth, because obviously, as people go through life, in many cases, they accumulate wealth in real estate and in businesses and in other forms. So they control a massive amount of wealth as a group. But then you have contradictory trends that I'm going to cover in a moment that counter this, that is creating a dissonance, a disconnect, opposing forces. Our country is changing. Our business workplace is changing. The work environment has changed drastically over the last several decades, and this, when you combine it with the other statistics, it creates pushes that are going in new directions that we've never seen in the country before. And then, of course, life expectancies and the health of the population. Older people no longer are expected just basically to fall over or to go away and stare at a fireplace, or it certainly doesn't happen at as young an age as it used to. Now, the funny thing about American society, you can look around and you'll see that America really doesn't know what to do about people who are over the age of 50. By the way, you might have gathered I'm definitely over the age of 50 myself. In fact, that was a little while ago. And it's okay. I was part of a generation many years ago that wasn't exactly very respectful of its own older generation. So I understand the way our society works. Back then, it was blatant, but now the youth orientation of our culture is not stated as directly, but it is still essentially the way our country operates. Is especially media puts all of the spotlights on a younger audience, and of course the demographics of what are considered the most desirable audiences all lean towards youth. Now, that's okay. But what isn't okay is that we don't have the mechanisms in our society to accommodate people as they grow older if they don't want to just go away. Okay. Now, bear that in mind, because my career has been built around entrepreneurship. And I understand that when something doesn't work or something doesn't make sense, that always creates an opportunity of some kind or other if you're willing to pay attention to it. So here are some other points that are creating. Jeff, would you turn your webcam off here, please? You just came on. Welcome. No need to have your webcam on. So,
How much do I turn it off? I never use it.
oh, okay. Well, that's fine. It's nice to see you and welcome.
Thank you.
So, um, uh, the parts of the society that are changing, because we're in the middle of it, we often don't spot these things. When you're in the middle of the forest, you can't see what the forest looks like exactly. But these things are all relevant and they matter to this conversation. Uh, um, my dad's generation, people basically worked at one company for their entire lives. My dad was an executive with Ford Motor Company, and he stayed with them for years and years and years and eventually retired and rose up through the ranks, and that's great. That doesn't happen very much these days. In fact, I find that it's hard to find people who have had those kinds of careers these days, especially if they don't work for themselves, like someone that's worked at Microsoft for 25 years or any other company. Someone that's just stayed doing one thing is really the exception rather than the rule. Now, the next thing I'm going to address here is simply the truth. We're getting noise from somebody there, Dave. Could you help me out, please? By the way, there's a chat window, and I welcome you sending any chat if you want. If you look on your monitor, you'll see a little rectangular box that you can click on, and that opens chat. We do keep people muted. Certainly invite you to participate or ask questions via chat, and I'll try and keep an eye on that as we go through this presentation. So um, it's not legal to discriminate against people based on their age when you're hiring, but it happens all the time anyway. And I'm not trying to be Pollyanna here. I'd rather just tell the truth. It's just a fact. And in fact, I have friends that I went to school with who have an incredibly hard time finding jobs because they are older adults. And what happens in the workplace is that there are a million different ways that a company can very subtly hire a younger employee and make it legal by saying that this person had a better resume for the job, or just there are a dozen different ways that you can do it gracefully and subtly where you are not bringing any negative consequences upon yourself. And I understand, because on paper the older worker is not necessarily a good hire, especially for what many companies want to do. I also have a daughter that recently graduated from college. And one of the things that happens at the other end of the spectrum, young workers, boy, they churn them and burn them. They put them in companies, they work them long hours. They just make them run really hard and work really hard. And they can get a particular benefit from this because, of course, younger workers are not necessarily up the pay scale really far. So these are just the realities, and I hope those of you in the audience listening understand that this is just the way it is. But our society doesn't match that. People over 50 now are not typically ready to just walk away and go, well, it was lovely. Some people don't want to, some people can't, because especially the recession in '08 flattened a lot of people's financial statements. So people that had built up good retirement nest eggs and others suddenly had many of their assets wiped out. And then there's the other point that is another megatrend, which is certainly a negative megatrend: student debt. If you are a parent and you've been carrying your kids through college and carrying their student loans, well, you certainly may have to continue working just to keep your bills paid. Again, this is just the way it is. These are just realities. So you get a can and can't sort of environment. You get people over 50 who have to work. They can't retire. They've lost their assets. They're carrying debt, whatever it is. And they don't want to retire, but you get a position where many companies will overtly or covertly, often covertly, just simply refuse to hire them, or they will come up with a reason that they have to retire. This is just the way it is in our society right now. And this is in part going back to the slide a few slides ago, that our society just isn't well designed to deal with citizens as they get beyond a certain age. It's just not very good at that. So the obvious point here is, if you can't get a job, if nobody's going to hire you, then you're almost forced to go into business for yourself. What else are you going to do? Some people become apathetic and just uh, um, try and scrounge the best they can. I know people roughly my age who've gone to work in coffee shops and that sort of thing, but it's never really worked out for them because, gosh, they are too skilled. They know too much to be doing those jobs. And yeah, they can get these low paying jobs, but it's just not a fit. And in life, when you don't fit somewhere, it doesn't last too long usually. And then there are other reasons. One of the things that I find interesting is when you look into over 50 entrepreneurship, you'll find the terms such as encore careers and second acts. And these types of perspectives do apply to quite a number of people, but it's very different than your garden variety over 50 entrepreneur. And I'd like to just take a moment and explain you who've been successful in their careers. Maybe somebody was a pilot for decades, or you have somebody who was in a business for years. So one of the things that I note is I've been talking on a project to people that have been IT managers, worked in information technology for decades, 25 years, one guy I talked with. And he's just sick of it. And he wants to get out and he wants to do something else. So those are the kinds of individuals that are typically mirrored in the media as encore careers or second acts. These are people who actually were successful in a career, have saved up a lot of money, and they now want to do something else. And I tend to sort the over 50 entrepreneurs into a few piles. The first cut I would make is, are we talking about entrepreneurs who really have to work? Or are we talking about people that are trying to fulfill purposes that they never got to fulfill and just did their duty with a career that they were involved in for decades? May not even have been something that they particularly liked. I actually do encounter that sort of thing. You have someone who was a lawyer but never really wanted to be a lawyer. He just thought he could make money. And you get that kind of stuff. And those people are primed to become over 50 entrepreneurs. And the difference is, of course, that oftentimes they can bring assets to bear. And in many cases, they've got significant networks of contacts. So when you see encore career or you see second acts, they are inevitably referencing the kind of person who fits in the second category. Person's had a career, done it, it's been good. All right, now I want to get back to the idea of a megatrend here for a moment. Conflicting pressures when you are in the business of entrepreneurship, conflicting trends and pressures, you don't look at them and shake your head and think how bad it is. A really good innovator steps back and and says, "Wow, that's amazing. I wonder what this might mean. I wonder where the opportunities are." And also, realistically, you want to know where to duck and not to get yourself taken out by something because you're not paying attention. But megatrends, these things that are so big that people can't control them easily. Smaller trends often can be ruled by a few people, but megatrends are inherently messy. So when you see a megatrend, that they often are created by churning forces that no one party or entity is creating or can control. And you have in our society the conflicting forces of a society that doesn't know what to do with older adults, that doesn't want to give them jobs, that really doesn't have good machinery for these people to engage. And then on the other side, you've got this large population of people who are pretty smart, who've had a lot of life experience, aren't ready to retire, and a society that doesn't accommodate them well. That creates a megatrend. Okay, now who else has noticed this? Well, of course, ARP has. Everybody knows ARP, and they actually have a section that's dealing with older entrepreneurs now. The SBA has noticed, and in fact, they're in partnership with ARP on a program. Wall Street Journal has noticed it. If you start looking around, you'll find that many others are starting to pay attention to this. It certainly is no longer an incipient trend. It's here right now. And um, if you start to look around at what this means, you'll find that plenty of entities are already starting to stir the pot as far as its megatrend. Okay, so I hope I've shown you enough information at this point to that you understand that there are forces engaged and that this is a big push and that things are moving in directions that are not always predictable. The thing about megatrends, and I would, by the way, advise anyone, Peter Drucker, who has been gone from the world for, oh, I'm going to guess 20 years or more now. Peter Drucker is a famous consultant from the 70s. I think he kept going into the 80s. Um, Peter S. Drucker, his book Innovation and Entrepreneurship. I sure like that book because Peter is the guy that got old in the fact that you look around the world and you pay attention to this kind of stuff, and it always has meaning that could have something to do with you. So let's look at what this might mean to you as someone who could be interested in what being an over 50 entrepreneur might portend. So obviously, it depends on who you are, where you are, and what you're doing. Are you over 50? That's, of course, the first cut. And do you intend to become an entrepreneur? Would you like to become an entrepreneur? These are, of course, the relevant points that matter to you. If you aren't over 50, or if you're not in this crowd, though, I do hope that you will note that this creates opportunities and liabilities for you. If you happen to be in the audience, let's say you're 25 years old, this still matters to you, and it's a big deal because one of the things that we will acknowledge in a few minutes is that it creates downward pressures on the economy, particularly for your young 20 somethings. It's funny when you get this large population that isn't retiring the way everyone thought they would and isn't just sitting and staring at the fireplace, the spillover initially actually hits the younger workers. So people that go and get a job at Starbucks who are older, they're taking a job that historically might have gone to a younger person. So they actually displace workers in the younger age group when it is not a skill based position. It can in a skill based position, but the first place you see it is you see people in these low paying jobs who are older workers, and they're actually displacing younger people who are having a hard time in our current environment finding jobs themselves. So this matters. Now, of course, the person at Starbucks isn't being an entrepreneur, but this is just a thing to note and be aware of. So the aspect of if you are younger, are you going to face competition from this? It could be true. Now, the other side of this is one of the things that I found, and one of the themes that I'm going to repeat a few times in this presentation is if you are an over 50 worker, if you're an over 50 entrepreneur and you don't manage what you are doing properly, you're going to get thrashed. If you don't play to your strengths properly, you're just going to get clobbered in the marketplace because there are already sufficient market forces that are not in your favor. That if you step right in front of that bus, you're going to get taken out economically and work-wise and career-wise. It's just the way it is. So you're going to have to use your head. And the thing that I also want to point out in this presentation is that there are plenty of places to take what you have done and what you know and use it to your advantage. We're going to get to that in a couple of minutes. And then positively and negatively, we'll look at this just in a moment. Do you sell goods and services that are going to go up or down? depending on where you stand by the fact that older people are continuing to work. Okay, so let's continue and let's look at some ups and some downs of this. Let's look at some stuff that's going to go up. These are growth arenas that you could be a part of some way, somehow, if you're a small business person, whether you're over 50 or not. Uh, Small business vendors of all kinds are thrilled that older adults are becoming entrepreneurs, and they love it. People that sell you cell phones, people that sell you computers, people that equip your home office, people that provide anything and everything, particularly for small business. And that can include what we call solopreneurs, people who just work for themselves. If you're a vendor of goods and services within this marketplace, this is some of the best news I could give you. All of this stuff is going to get a push, especially on the front end. Some products and services benefit entrepreneurs more in the early stages than in the later stages. And while this isn't a presentation about entrepreneurship per se, entrepreneurs are an interesting group as a crowd. Like they tend to be isolated. They don't have good herd instincts because some of the characteristics that make someone an entrepreneur makes them nonconformists, and they don't like to play by the same rules as everybody else in general. But if you step back and you look at them as a group, there are behavior patterns, there are things that they do. And you, as someone who wants to gain economic opportunity from this, can service that in all kinds of ways. And the needs of entrepreneurs over 50 are different than those of your younger entrepreneurs. I'm going to cover this more, but responding to those needs is definitely a growth arena that anyone of any age can take advantage of. Okay, now some areas are going to go down. If I were a retirement planner, I would be at first blush looking at this and not feeling that great about it. In fact, I've noticed television ads have picked up for older adults about retirement planning and urging them. And there have even been commercials that talk about the second act and encore career aspects, essentially saying, why don't you save your money and do what you really wished you had done for the last 30 years? So they're already responding to this, and you, as a person that pays attention to your environment and your marketplace, you want to see these things and go, that's right, that's part of this mega trend. Now, the biggest downside I consider is not just the worker being displaced at Starbucks, but older entrepreneurs are going to compete for maybe not as much institutional venture capital, although that could cut either direction. And I do have a slide that discusses this a little bit, and I will talk about it more in a couple of minutes. But it creates downward pressure for in multiple market segments as older people form their businesses. They compete with not only younger workers for jobs, but they compete with other businesses. So there will be many losers as older adults get into the marketplace and become entrepreneurs. There'll be many losers and there'll be many winners. It's just the way these kinds of forces create influences. So part of what I might recommend from this presentation is you observe the megatrend and you sit back and you go, what does this mean to me? For example, I was just envisioning for a moment a great thing, for example, for older entrepreneurs, and actually for all entrepreneurs, but particularly I think for older entrepreneurs, is access to 3D printing technology. It is true that many older adults are not as technically skilled as younger people are. That is a cliche, but cliches usually start by having some truth. And many older workers are not that great with devices, but many of us are. And more to the point, somebody that can facilitate the use of making small products in limited quantities, someone that could help entrepreneurs do that. That's an absolute win position, in my opinion, for somebody who knows how to reach a marketplace and say, do you have some ideas for some products? Are they not too complicated? Let us work with you to get those in the market at a reasonable cost. And you're going to see more and more and more of that. I actually think that some retirement communities may start calling business centers. Why not? Um, there's no reason that someone, I'm going to pick a number, 68 years old, 71 years old, 72, who's in pretty good health, won't continue to do stuff. In fact, that may be part of this megatrend is you have people that will maybe not do that full time, but they'll have their hands in some aspect of business until the point they can't go anymore. That may be me. I like doing this stuff. So I actually personally don't have a mental image of the ideal life being that I'm sitting on a bank somewhere casting lines out into the water to try and catch trout. That's just not what excites me. So I'd like to keep doing stuff as long as I can. So imagine retirement communities that acknowledge that and play to it and actually facilitate those kinds of things. We could guess that some of those facilities will have an advantage in the marketplace in the future. We can posit that and guess that. All right, now let's look at the entrepreneurs themselves and how things are different and how they might be the same. Okay, older entrepreneurs are not the same as younger ones. And I'm going to take a moment and take a sip of water. Okay, there are positives and negatives. Your older adults have all kinds of stuff that they've built up over decades. The most important one, typically from the standpoint of launching a business, is you know a lot of people. You've been to lots of meetings. You've met people. You've got people who've trusted you now for 25 or 30 years. Those are real resources. Those are real assets. Younger entrepreneurs often rely upon college contacts, or they have to go networking themselves, or that, they really have to put themselves out there. In fact, that's part of why social media tends, from a business standpoint, to be a bit more youth oriented, is because these younger people haven't built their networks yet, and they just have to do it. Now, the negative side of older entrepreneurship is that younger entrepreneurs can definitely outwork most older entrepreneurs. They'll work longer hours. They will live in substandard conditions. They'll push themselves. They'll push their families. They'll take big risks. And that frequently doesn't work out so well. In fact, in a future slide, I'm going to point out that statistically, older entrepreneurs tend to succeed, where many younger entrepreneurs crash their first company or two or three or four, because this go for it, take the big risk, go for everything type of approach. When you're young, you can do it and you can recover. Older people can't do it and they won't do it. Most older adults get set in their ways to such an extent that they just won't put themselves out in that kind of way. And that across the entire group becomes a negative. Okay, the obvious positive is within your field as an older adult, as an older entrepreneur, you may be a master of more than one thing. And older entrepreneurs, if this is you, if you're over 50 and you want to be an entrepreneur, don't discount the little pockets of skill sets that you have that you're actually really good at. It becomes really easy when you've done stuff for 20, 30, even 40 years. It becomes too easy to forget what you know in things that you're not using today. So an example in my case is in the early days of the Pacific Venture Club, I ran events every month. That means I rented a facility and I got people to show up, and I conducted meetings and people would show up and I would run those meetings. Not unlike this, except obviously the chamber and other people are helping to bring audiences in. But I actually got pretty good as an event planner and had a rhythm for walking into a facility and the air conditioning is stuck on. And what do I do now? And boy, I could just be on top of that and handle that stuff fast. And I got, if not a master's level of skills, I certainly became a professional at that sort of thing. Now, I don't do that too much anymore. And some of those skills are certainly outdated, but you'll notice how I am spilling some of these skills over into the webinar space. And as an old, you might have 10 different things that you're pretty darn good at that you may not even notice. But more to the point, as an older entrepreneur, that is that's your sword. That's what you go out into the marketplace and use that gives you the leverage against the younger entrepreneur or against other competitors in the marketplace. It's the confluence of events for the older entrepreneur that gives him or her the advantage, not just sitting in one skill pocket. I'm going to talk about that more in a few minutes. Okay, now my career has been built on entrepreneurs and ideas and innovation. And I have to confess to you, I have to work harder at my age. When something that is truly new and surprising is put in front of me, I have to work harder not to prejudge it and not to run it through my older systems of analysis. I have to work harder to look at something freshly and newly than a younger person might. So there's the negative. Older adults can be less responsive to new ideas. They don't welcome them. They don't like them and more stuck in their perspective. So the welcoming and liking is one thing. You can notice that and do something about it. But the stuck in your perspective part, that's not a very good thing. So it means the lens through which you're looking, you don't even note that you're using a lens. And that's really dangerous in the field of entrepreneurship. All entrepreneurs should constantly ask themselves what biases they're operating off of that they just assume to be true, that may or may not be true. That's a really important thing to be aware of. Heck, I was just reading a couple of weeks ago, even Steve Jobs got some stuff wrong with Apple. There was a write-up called Five Things Steve Jobs Got Wrong. And I'm not going to go into that in any great detail, but one of them was the fact that he didn't think anyone would want tablets that are 7 inches or so in size. And that's just not the way the market has responded. There were other things. You get stuck when you become a master of something. It actually is a double-edged sword because the one side is the part of it that you're so good at. And then the other side of it is your biases and assumptions that you don't want to take apart or take down, because if you did, you'd be admitting to yourself you're not a master anymore. So please, if you are an over 50 adult becoming an entrepreneur, please notice that or be interested in that for yourself. Okay, there are other differences. These matter. I mentioned this. When I was researching this presentation, older adults who become entrepreneurs are far more likely to have a success or not have their businesses blow up. Younger entrepreneurs are just reckless and tend to plow their businesses into a brick wall somewhere. Older adults are much more reliable and predictable and much more likely to make it work. That break point starts to happen around the age of 35 plus. As you get into that range, they start to have an increasing level of success. And then people who are in their 50s who start a business are tend to be more conservative. It may not be as big a barn burner as the guy who creates Facebook, but it's going to be pretty reliable. That's just statistically. Now, obviously, youth, per what I was just discussing a few minutes ago, is terrific at surprise. One of the things I love about entrepreneurship is it's a field full of surprise. And as you get older, you may not like surprises, but it's also harder for you to surprise others. So younger people just have it all over us older folks as far as certain aspects of innovation, particularly things that come out of left field and were unexpected completely. Now, here's one that I don't have any statistics to back this up, but I just noticed since I deal with entrepreneurs, I think there are more older women entrepreneurs compared to younger entrepreneurs. Now, women have been, just as a trend, creating more and more entrepreneurial opportunities. That's just something that has been moving forward as a trend. But I think when you get into the older entrepreneur range, I think that that increases and picks up. I don't have any evidence to back that up. It's just my anecdotal experience. Okay, the last point on this slide I want to discuss. I want to talk about capitalization. It's a mixed bag going both directions. Your typical venture capitalists, and when I say venture capitalists, I'm talking institutional entities that are in the business of investing in companies. And as a side note, most people on this call wouldn't qualify for institutional venture capital anyway. Nonetheless, it has been a major force and factor in our economy for decades, and they are worthy of respect. It's just they have a way of looking at the world that doesn't fit. Uh, you know, you might get one out of 1,000 that really does fit their model, and when it does fit, it's great. So the what venture capitalists typically want is they want an entrepreneur who's all in. The guy's put his mortgage, he's put the equity in his house on the line. He's risked everything. And they like to see that because if they're going to risk their capital, they want to see you do it too. I don't know many older entrepreneurs who would actually risk everything. Um, I wouldn't, and I don't. And venture capitalists, institutional guys don't like that. In fact, investors of all kinds don't like it when you're not committed. Um, Nonetheless, older people do tend to be more risk averse, and just not be willing to win or lose everything on that. Now, the thing about that is older entrepreneurs are more likely to know somebody that would invest in their business in the first place anyway. You have friends, maybe you've saved some money yourself. You have people you can talk to. You've raised money. You know how to go out and get it. It becomes less of a constraint for most older entrepreneurs um, because they've got so much life experience and they have the networks. So, what would be more likely for an older entrepreneur is he'd just go and put together a few people and cut a deal with them and move forward with what he's doing. Okay, now one of the things that I think is worth mentioning in this is that entrepreneurship is not a solo thing. Every entrepreneur has a family around him, unless he's some guy who sits in his apartment and codes all night long and doesn't have anyone that he really engages with. But um, it's meaningful that a younger entrepreneur is moving into a place where he is taking on more of the world. He's having children. He's got a wife or she has a husband, and they've got agreements and they've got obligations and mortgages and all this stuff. And so what happens is usually they get stressed out by the disharmony between the entrepreneur who has to work these long hours and codes late at night and takes all these chances, and then the need of a family to have some security and ability to move forward. So that creates a dissonance that has its own factors for the younger entrepreneur. Now, your older entrepreneur may be done with all that, but they've got different pressures around their lifestyle, which is one of the common things. That's your second act and your encore career sort of person. I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work this way. I won't work this way. You get that with your older entrepreneur. They've also got things coming up like they've got to make sure that they're healthy enough. They've got to keep themselves mobile. They may consider retirement. And that causes them to have to adjust their expectations within their families. Now, oftentimes it may just be with a spouse, but those are real flashpoints if it's not managed well. So older entrepreneurs have a different dynamic to contend with, but it's still a flashpoint if not addressed properly. And then, of course, young entrepreneurs, if someone says, if you take your company to Texas, I'll invest in you, they go, good, I'll be packed by next week. Older entrepreneurs just aren't likely to do that. Um, Now let's talk. I've got just a couple of more things to cover with you in this overview today of the megatrend itself. Let's talk about what it looks like if you're an over 50 entrepreneur to what it looks like to choose well and to position yourself well. So um, a lot of this is strategic. The thing that I've seen with many of my friends and associates who have not done well as an over 50 entrepreneur is they put themselves right in the crosshairs of the negative trends that make it hard for someone over 50. So a great example is, and I mean, I don't mean to pick on graphic design, but it's a great example. Art as a field is loved by many people. Many younger people get degrees in graphic design or in art, and then they go out in the marketplace and they try and get jobs doing graphic design or web design or something like that. And what that does is it creates a tremendous amount of pressure, downward pressure economically within that segment. So an older entrepreneur who walks in and just tries to design websites or just tries to do graphic design or something, they are walking into the hardest place to win that you could imagine. Similarly, trying to walk into something that is high rev, high energy, let's go, 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 let's work 70 hours a week, those kinds of things, you're just not going to win when you go into those positions unless you are the ultimate Jedi master within that and you've got the kudos and you've got the resume and you've got the clients that you can carry with you. If that's the case, then you are the master and everyone already knows it and you're going to do fine. But when you're trying to position yourself counter trend, you're going to lose and it's the wrong thing to do. In many cases, being the older entrepreneur, being the person that does the graphic design or being the person that builds the thing is not good positioning. You what many people don't notice as they become older is they've gotten way better at managing people and circumstances and events than they even pay attention to. So oftentimes younger workers are not terribly good at dealing with conflict, managing other people, managing resources, and older people are great at it. So opportunities often exist to create some kind of entity where you are managing those kinds of resources, but you're not actually the person doing those tasks. So you would have an advantage over managing. You would have a liability over doing the work yourself. I mentioned this point earlier. Look for combinations of skill sets that you've developed over many years that make you unique and define a precise niche. This precise niche thing, um, if you have developed near master level skills at within 3 or 4 areas, the confluence there will be a defined point often where those areas combine that almost nobody can compete against you. And I found this early in my career decades ago. I don't like to do it so much anymore, but I used to spend a lot of time uh, with capital raising and understanding how you raise capital for companies. And I did that for years and years and years. Won some, lost some, but I sure knew a lot about it. And at the time that I did that, there weren't many people who'd specialize in understanding those different aspects of particularly entrepreneurial businesses. So I found that I could get engagements where other people couldn't. And I have those skills now, and I've added a bunch of other things to it. And it's that confluence that makes you powerful, and you must play to what you have that the younger entrepreneur, the competitor, can't do, doesn't have. You must play to that. Now, Um, if you have money to purchase a business, if you're a second act person, if you're an encore career person, um, you are more likely to be looking for something that really responds to your emotional needs than you may notice. Many people over the age of 50 have just had enough with whatever they were about. They've had enough. And they can mistakenly launch themselves into things that they really shouldn't be in the middle of. They can start businesses they really have no place getting involved in, or they can buy a business that they have no place being involved in because they haven't really posited through all the different aspects that are going to be relevant to their circumstances. The funny thing about being an older entrepreneur is you must accommodate your needs and lifestyle way more than the younger entrepreneur does. If you don't do that, you're setting yourself up to fail. So you even if you're buying a business, your list of things to evaluate includes intangibles that the younger entrepreneur wouldn't even think about. Okay, and then the obvious thing is you don't know if you don't know how to market it, then you don't have any business trying to do that in the first place. You know, if you don't know how you're going to get customers, you either need to figure it out or you need to acquire somebody who will do that for you. All right. And then here's my final slide on the rules. Someone's making a little racket there, Dave. If you could look for whatever that might be. Um, Someone's clattering. And I know it isn't me. The only clattering I'm doing is with my teeth. So, what are the rules for being the over 50 entrepreneur? So, don't fight your lifestyle, fit within it. That's really the first thing. You can't win when you're over the age of 50 if you're fighting yourself. You're not going to win. You're too old to be doing that. You have too much of an emotional history within your life. You don't want to fight yourself. Okay, you got to have challenges, yes, but you can't burn yourself out. You must play to your strengths, your assets that you've developed over years. You are making a big mistake if you compete against the things that others who are younger and have those assets right at their hands have that you don't have or can't do. You can't win that way. Don't do it, please. And the next one essentially reiterates that. You position yourself where someone who is younger than you finds it hard to compete against you because of what you are. Then the last couple of points, except for rare exceptions, you must be familiar and able to engage technology assets that exist nowadays. I do know some people that do just fine, thank you, with craftsperson based skills. In fact, I had a guitar repaired yesterday by this company. It's a little company of a few guys, and they're older guys, and they're just fabulous. They're so good at it. They found what was my problem instantly, and they fixed it just bing like that. And I dropped by and handed them this guitar, and they just fixed it. And these guys have work coming out the back door. So when you're a master at something, you may not have to use a lot of social media. The website these guys have is not very good. And they still have work coming out the back door. So you can do that. But generally speaking, you've got to master this stuff, or you have to have some way of engaging with our modern technology, or you will be left in the bushes. Um, and then finally, manage all of this as closely as you can on your own terms. You're not young anymore. Do it your way. You can win. Do it your way.